How much longer, hey? How much longer will you keep us waiting? Voices of rage reverberated throughout the event space. The major problem with the company's presentation was that the guests didn't comprehend German or English. The seminar manager, the daughter of the firm president, stood pale and still in amazement. Well, well, well. I snatched up the microphone in the middle of the confusion, and the hall's atmosphere abruptly altered. You, who are you? When I looked out the window after waking up in the uncomfortable airline seat, I observed a crowded group of buildings below. Over time, the modest, flat-looking buildings grew into enormous skyscrapers. The Empire State Building loomed over Times Square, its neon lights flickering in the waning night sky. Eyeing the flower-shaped papercraft in my palm, instead of the dawn-stained landscape, I whispered, "I'm home." Taylor, Lucas, 28 years old. I was back in America. My parents lost their lives in an automobile accident, a huge traffic jam on the interstate, 15 years ago. A tanker ahead was struck by my dad's automobile after it was rear-ended. The car's front end was so badly damaged that it was unrecognizable. The news that day focused significantly on the destruction, showing the driver and passenger seats entirely crushed. Both my mother, who was in the passenger seat, and my father, who was operating the vehicle, perish. However, I survived as a 13-year-old who was seated in the back seat at the time. We had been traveling to a big hospital in New York to see my younger sister Emily. Emily, who was 2 years my junior, was constantly in and out of the hospital due to a congenital heart issue. Emily's doctor had reported that day that she was improving and might be released for a short time the following week. Emily and I engaged in paper crafts as our parents spoke with the doctor. We laughed a lot on the way home as we discussed what kind of cake to acquire to commemorate her return and what meals we would prepare together. Then everything happened in a flash. In the blink of an eye, it was all over. Emily had crafted a morning glory flower that day, and I was holding it. My maternal grandma took in Emily and me because my dad's parents had already died. However, she already lived alone, and it was too much for her to handle alone while taking care of a sick child like Emily and a middle schooler like me. In addition, I had become reclusive following the stress of the event. I had vague recollections of the period. My mom's younger brother, Uncle Jack, was the one who contacted me at that time. I didn't know my uncle very well because he was constantly busy traveling the world for work. However, since I was a young child, my mother had always told me that he was her cherished younger brother and that she was proud of him. "Lucas, how about coming with me and seeing the world?" As I stood there in silence at my parents' grave, he said this with complete conviction. The sudden decision to take in a middle school student was a significant commitment for an uncle who had cherished the independence of being alone. I went around the world with him after that. We would occasionally spend a year in a country, and other times just a few months. Jack encouraged independence and seldom interfered, but he never let me worry about money. I was initially overcome by emotional shock and the abrupt shift in my surroundings. However, I gradually developed my ability to interact with the outside world. Emily, meantime, continued her pattern of hospitalizations and discharges while staying with our grandma in the United States. Her brother likewise abruptly moved for overseas after she lost both of her parents so abruptly. An 11-year-old girl must have had an incredible sense of loss. Whenever I returned to the U.S., usually once a year, Emily would cling to me with a radiant smile. Even as she grew older, she still acted like the same 11-year-old girl, holding back sobs with a flushed face whenever I had to leave. I would wipe away Emily's falling tears, promising her each time, "I'll definitely come back for you once I'm able to work." In return, Emily would hand me a flower-shaped paper craft she had made. She would call it a good luck charm, as if entrusting her hopes and wishes to that piece of paper. Work in America and live with Emily, that was my dream and my purpose. To support Emily's medical needs, I needed a stable income and a solid living environment. Following Jack's advice, I graduated from a university in Switzerland in 4 years. I found a job with an American company. Now I can finally live with Emily. When I called to share the good news, Emily's voice sounded happier than I had ever heard. But right after that, the global pandemic struck, making it nearly impossible to leave Switzerland. Days passed in the frustrating limbo of helplessness, waiting for the crisis to end. And then, the worst happened. Emily has. My grandmother's frail voice on the phone sounded distant. Emily, who had fought so hard despite being told she might not live past 20, had reached the end of her fight. I couldn't even attend her funeral, and was unable to say goodbye to the only family I had left. I canceled my planned job with the American company and ended up working in Switzerland. Unable to return to the U.S., even after travel restrictions were lifted, I still couldn't accept the world without Emily. This year, I was assigned to transfer to the U.S. branch and return to America for the first time in 7 years. Welcome home, Lucas. After handling the paperwork for my new apartment, I headed to my grandmother's house in the evening. She looked smaller than I remembered from our last meeting. You're staying for dinner, right? Oh, but first, you should say hi to everyone. My grandmother, who was always eager to care for me when we met after so long, suddenly glanced toward the back room. There was a memorial space in that room, adorned with photos of my parents, and a smiling young girl. I felt the world sway for a moment. Who is in that photo? The pounding in my ears grew louder. Was that the sound of my own heartbeat? Unable to bear the growing tightness in my chest, I mumbled an excuse about an urgent matter and rushed out of my grandmother's house. I wandered the streets to calm my racing heart. Night had already fallen. New York was as lively as ever, crowded with people to the point where I wondered how anyone could live in such a bustling place. Among this sea of people, I felt like Emily could be somewhere out there. That thought gave me a strange sense of comfort. The humid June air brought back memories of New York. Seasoned holding a strong canned cocktail I bought at a liquor shop, I aimlessly wandered the streets. Only in New York could I get away with something like this. As my heartbeat settled, I exhaled and stopped walking. Before I knew it, I had wandered into a back alley near the entertainment district, the so-called nightlife scene. That's when I heard a woman's voice cry out, "Let me go." I turned toward the sound and saw a man grabbing a woman's arm while smirking. The woman raised her voice, trying to free herself, but the people around her only glanced over and quickly looked away, making no attempt to help. This wasn't exactly the safest area, so maybe scenes like this were all too common. While I debated whether to intervene or look the other way, the man passed by me, dragging the woman toward the deeper part of the alley. I decided to stay out of it. But then I caught a familiar scent as they passed. I knew that smell, Emily. Before I realized it, I was sprinting into the alley. The man looked shocked when I appeared out of nowhere, and his face turned pale when I suddenly grabbed him by the collar. I must have looked terrifying, shouting at him like a madman, my eyes undoubtedly wild with rage. The man panicked and ran off, leaving the woman behind. I turned to her and hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry I'm so late." A mix of alcohol and the sterile scent of hospitals clung to her. It's really Emily. She's alive. Overwhelmed with joy and on the verge of tears, I hugged Emily even tighter. But suddenly, the woman's body tensed, and she began to struggle against my embrace. "Let go of me." The moment my grip loosened, pain exploded across my cheek. "Let go, you creep." As I registered the slap that landed without mercy, I was startled by the unfamiliar voice. Who was this? The woman standing before me was a stranger. She did seem to be around Emily's age, but the woman glaring at me with eyes full of confusion, anger, and fear looked nothing like the Emily I knew. "I'm sorry. I thought you were my sister." "That's right. Emily couldn't be here." I knew that. I really did. Your sister. What's wrong with you? Are you crazy? The woman's face twisted in disgust as she turned and ran off. Her lingering scent was still that familiar smell. The humid air wouldn't let it leave my nose. What the hell is wrong with me? Maybe the strong alcohol dulled my senses and made me lose it. I stood frozen in that spot, unable to move for a long time. The following Monday was my first day working at the U.S. branch. My job was to promote our medical products at events and seminars. I was scheduled to be stationed there for 1 to 2 years to help expand our market share in the U.S. and beyond. Lucas, you'll be assisting with the next scheduled seminar and event. This is Mary Sutherland, the event manager. After being introduced by my supervisor, Mary and I exchanged greetings, and then froze as we looked at each other. Once my supervisor finished explaining everything and left, an awkward tension filled the air between us. Well, I really am sorry for the other day. Even though it was a case of mistaken identity, I put you through a terrifying experience. I was the first to break the silence. Standing before me was Mary, the woman I had mistaken for Emily and hugged that night. I never expected that the guy from the other night would turn out to be from our company, let alone someone transferred from the headquarters. Should I call the police? I'm really sorry. I know this sounds like a lame excuse, but I had just arrived in the U.S. that day, was jet-lagged, and had been drinking. I wasn't thinking straight. Hearing my own words made me realize just how pathetic they sounded. Mary let out a small sigh. Please, you can raise your head now. It's true that you reeked of alcohol that night. Being drunk doesn't excuse your actions, but regardless of your intentions, you did save me in a dangerous situation, so I won't speak about this incident. You're supposed to be a highly skilled specialist sent from the main office. As long as you deliver results at work, I don't care about your personal character. However, don't approach me unnecessarily. While making it clear she didn't trust me, she never brought up the incident again after that. With her sharp, confident gaze, flawless makeup, and long, slightly wavy hair, she was the epitome of a capable professional. The more I looked at her, the less she resembled Emily. After that disastrous first encounter, I never noticed the same unique scent of alcohol around her again. A few days later, I learned from my colleagues that Mary was the branch manager's daughter. This company wasn't the kind of place where executives could simply hire their relatives. She went through the same hiring process as other employees and even faced her father during the final interview. It's well known in the company that the branch manager had no idea his own daughter was applying until the day of the interview, and was genuinely shocked when she walked in. Mary was exceptional at her job and had already led several major projects at just 26 years old. I felt both admiration and a pang of sadness, knowing that a woman Emily's age had accomplished so much, something my sister never got the chance to do. I found myself searching for connections between my sister and her, even though they were nothing alike. But I forced those thoughts out of my mind and threw myself into my work. By the time 2 months had passed at the branch, Mary's guarded attitude toward me seemed to have softened somewhat. Today, we had a meeting with representatives from the company we were co-hosting the seminar with next month. It was my first time attending, so I'd be meeting their representatives for the first time. Before the meeting, I asked Mary about the representative from the other company. She replied, "I don't think we'll get any valuable input from them, so we'll handle the discussion ourselves and wrap it up quickly." A response that could easily be taken as condescending. I was surprised by her blunt comment. In the 2 months I'd known her, Mary had never struck me as someone who looked down on others. Feeling puzzled, I entered the meeting room, and when the representative from the other company called out to me, I immediately understood. It all made sense. "Lucas? Are you Lucas Taylor?" That was his first response to my greeting. Having worked in Switzerland, where business etiquette was more casual, I'd initially struggled with formal English in professional settings, and I still wasn't fully used to it. But even I felt like frowning at the way this man leaned in close and shouted his greeting. "Have we met before?" Forcing a smile to keep from frowning, I asked politely. He looked at me as if I'd said something ridiculous. "It's me, Brian Jones. We were in middle school together. You remember, right? We were in the same class in 7th grade until you moved out. I even hung out with you back then." As he grinned and introduced himself, I dredged up vague memories until I finally recalled him. "Oh right, Brian. Long time no see. I never expected to run into you in a professional setting. I had been in an accident before summer break in 7th grade and left the country with my uncle that winter. To be honest, I barely remembered anything from middle school. My time at that school was too short for me to make any real friends. When I returned to school after the accident, most of the students treated me like I was fragile, while others saw me as a source of gossip and pestered me with questions about the accident. Brian had been one of those kids. You stopped coming to school, and then you left without saying goodbye. We thought you might have, done something drastic because of losing your parents." His grin made it clear that he had never been genuinely worried. It had always been a joke to him. "Still, I can't believe you're with that company now. Are you a temp or something? Are you a high school graduate?" Brian's smirk widened as he said something so absurd I was momentarily speechless. "Don't worry. I'll guide you during this event so you don't mess things up. You better not drag Mary down. Mary, you can count on me." He suddenly turned his attention to Mary and started boasting with an air of exaggerated confidence. Such a blatant attempt to show off, and it was completely unprofessional. Just as I was about to speak up to steer the conversation back on track, Mary interrupted. "Excuse me, but our company only hires college graduates. And yes, that includes Lucas. He's an employee from the Swiss headquarters. Technically, I'm the one who should be learning from him. I'm sure you can learn quite a bit from Lucas during this event, Brian. Also, while our company hires only college graduates, personally, I don't think academic background matters that much. After all, some people have impressive degrees but lack character." Mary spoke calmly, not even glancing at Brian. Before Brian, his face flushed red, could say anything, I urged everyone to move on due to time constraints. Only Mary responded with a, "Let's move on to the main topic," before smoothly transitioning to the work discussion. One of Brian's assistants looked awkward, while Brian himself remained silent, barely hiding his irritation. Once the meeting ended and we were alone, I turned to Mary. "Mary, thanks for stepping in earlier, but you really didn't have to. Won't that cause tension between the companies? I feel like it's my fault for being here." This event was officially a joint collaboration, but Mary was the one in charge. A conflict involving the person responsible would undoubtedly complicate things. "It's not your fault, Lucas, so don't worry about it. Brian has always acted that way, and I just reached my limit." She shrugged with a faint smile. Was I a bit childish? Seeing her playful side, I shrugged and chuckled. Saying that last line really packed a punch. I really hate people who label others, look down on them, and make snap judgments without knowing the full story. That straightforward opinion was so typical of Mary. But to be honest, when I was a kid, I used to do the same thing, jumping to conclusions about people. There were always people talking behind my back because of who my dad was, and that just made me more rebellious. But someone told me that wasn't right. She said to me, and to the kids who looked at me with prejudice, "It's a waste to judge someone based on just one side of who they are." "Sounds like an amazing person," she responded quietly. "Yes, she really was," I replied, her long lashes lowering with a hint of sadness. After that, the daily work and preparations for the event went smoothly. Brian never brought up the incident again. In fact, he didn't just stay silent, but he practically did nothing. He only completed tasks when explicitly instructed. As Mary had predicted, there was no valuable input from him. The day of the seminar event arrived. The main target audience was foreign healthcare workers hoping to work in the U.S. American healthcare facilities are highly regarded worldwide, attracting many international nurses. Applications came from people in various countries, particularly from Europe. An hour before the event start time, despite the preparation being scheduled to begin 2 hours prior, Brian was nowhere to be seen. Some of the necessary equipment and materials for this event were his responsibility to prepare. They were also in charge of providing the translation devices that contained audio recordings of the seminar content and materials customized by language for the attendees. This seminar was promoted as accessible even to those without knowledge of German. Since medical terminology is difficult, even for those fluent in German, the translation devices tailored to each participant's language were a key feature. Without them, complaints from the attendees were inevitable. I tried calling Brian multiple times, but he wasn't answering. His assistant had another event to handle today and couldn't make it, so Brian was supposed to come alone. Since the event was being held on a Sunday, the company office itself was closed, so calling the office line was useless. We were completely stuck. Time dwindled down to the last 30 minutes. The seats in the venue were gradually filling up with attendees. There were 50 attendees in total. Although it wasn't a large-scale event, the seminar played an important role in collecting data that would be useful for the development of future electronic medical records. To ensure future seminars, this event needed to be a success. The clock was ticking. Seeing Mary's growing anxiety, I told her to stall for time by briefly touching on the seminar content during her opening remarks, and then I stepped away. When I returned a few minutes later, complaints had already begun to erupt from the attendees. "Hey, how much longer? How long are you going to keep us waiting?" Despite her flustered state, Mary was holding her ground and delivering her speech in German. Impressive as always. "I'm very sorry. Please wait just a little longer." However, many attendees weren't German speakers. Seeing Mary struggling to respond to attendees who were pressing her in languages other than German, I stepped forward and began speaking. "My sincerest apologies for the delay. We'll be ready shortly. So in the meantime, I'll take any questions you have." I announced this in German and as many other languages as I could manage. As Mary stood speechless beside me, I continued switching between German and other languages to calm the attendees and buy us more time. Once we stepped away from the front, Mary turned to me and said, "Lucas, that was amazing. How many languages do you speak?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. "Well, after living in so many countries, including Spanish and German, maybe 6, but only at a conversational level, and it's nothing formal anyway." The real challenge starts now. Still no response from Brian. What should we do? Sure, I can handle basic conversations, but when it comes to medical content, we really need the translation devices that Brian was supposed to provide. Mary, visibly stressed, took out her phone. Something fell from her pocket. Mary, you dropped something." A paper craft. I picked up a flower-shaped paper craft. It was laminated, worn at the edges, and looked quite old. "Oh, I'm sorry. That's my good luck charm." I couldn't take my eyes off it, making Mary look at me curiously. "Well, right. Sorry. I'll be right back. I'm going to buy some papercraft supplies from the store next door." She dashed off toward the building adjacent to the venue. 10 minutes later, she returned, slightly out of breath, and began distributing 2 sheets of paper to each participant. "Lucas, could you translate what I'm about to say to the attendees?" She set up the camera to film her hands and displayed the footage on the monitor. "I'd like to introduce you to paper crafting, an activity that's also used in American pediatric wards and rehabilitation centers." With that statement, Mary kicked off an impromptu papercraft workshop. Often thought of as just a kid's activity, paper crafting is sometimes incorporated into medical and caregiving settings. The simple yet intricate use of both hands and brain stimulation, combined with customizable difficulty levels, makes it an effective rehabilitation exercise. As she explained this, the paper craft workshop surprisingly captivated the participants. As they followed along and began making their crafts, everyone seemed both focused and genuinely enjoying themselves. Midway through the workshop, Brian's assistant finally arrived with the translation devices, allowing the seminar to continue as planned. The seminar, which had been delayed by about 30 minutes, finally concluded. As I saw a female participant happily holding a misshapen paper flower on her way out, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Once the room was empty, it fell silent. "What do you think you're doing?" Mary's clear, composed voice rang through the quiet venue, tinged with anger. The assistant and Brian had arrived during the papercraft workshop because I had called the assistant directly. Brian, who hadn't expected me to have his assistant's contact information, glared at Mary with a bitter expression. "Why did we go 30 minutes over the rental time? This is a shared seminar event. You can't just run over like that." "Well, since you're the main coordinator, I guess your side will cover the cost, right? The content was well received, wasn't it? Do you have any complaints about that, Brian?" "What the hell are you saying?" Even Brian's assistant looked bewildered by his nonsensical remarks. "Do you even realize the chaos you caused? Or did you show up late on purpose to sabotage things? Do you have any pride in your work at all?" Mary's rising anger was palpable. "I was late. Who says I was? Stop accusing me. Hey, I was here the whole time, right?" He placed a hand on the assistant's shoulder, blatantly intimidating him. The assistant looked too scared to contradict him. I felt a wave of disgust at Brian's reckless actions and childish attempts to bully others. "Can you still say that after seeing the company car footage?" Mary's tone, once fiery, turned cold and sharp. "Huh." Brian looked confused, so I added more context. "The company car you used today belongs to our company. All our cars are equipped with dash cams." Brian had been using one of our company cars for transporting equipment. At that, Brian's face turned pale. The dash cam's GPS, timestamped route, in-car footage, and audio would clearly reveal the truth, and his lies could be reported to the company without issue. "This will be reported to your company. And I'll also report the repeated, unnecessary personal messages you've sent me as harassment. Don't contact me ever again." Mary's expression was as cold as ice, her anger replaced by a chilling finality. Brian's face went ghostly white, and there was no way we'd ever work with him again. Cheers. Cheers. Despite the ups and downs, the seminar event gave us a solid sense of accomplishment, so Mary and I went out for drinks to celebrate. Thinking about it, this was the first time we'd gone out for drinks together. Even though it was September, the humidity lingered, and the night air felt uncomfortably warm. The ice-cold beer was refreshing, cutting through the muggy atmosphere. "Brian was messaging you personally. Why didn't you report it to the company earlier?" "I wanted to wait until the seminar event was over. I was trying to handle it peacefully. But after today, I completely lost my patience. I'm going to make sure he can never work with us again." She spoke casually, nibbling on a pickle as though used to dealing with unwanted advances. At a glance, she's a radiant and beautiful woman. It's no surprise that plenty of men try to approach her. Nothing happened this time, but you should be careful. If something like that happens again, report it to the executives sooner. It's too late once something happens. "Lucas, are you secretly a worrywart? You're like a dad, or maybe an older brother, considering your age." Mary burst out laughing at my advice, making me feel a bit embarrassed, like I had overreacted. I had a younger sister. Maybe that's why I tend to worry when it comes to women around her age. A younger sister. Oh yeah, you mentioned that when we first met, right? Was that true? Hearing the word sister seemed to jog her memory of our first encounter, and she asked for the truth. Now, of all times. I let out a sigh and slumped my shoulders. I probably came across as suspicious, and I really did something terrible that day. But yes, it's true. I had a younger sister who was 2 years younger than me. She would have been the same age as you. You had a sister. What happened to her? She passed away. At my words, Mary whispered, "I'm so sorry," as if apologizing for something she couldn't quite name. More importantly, that spontaneous papercraft workshop you came up with today, it was brilliant. It was such a creative idea, Aid, and I think it could be a great addition to future international seminar events. If we got help from physical therapists or specialists, we could make it even more impactful. Don't you think? I changed the subject, trying to shift the mood. Saying out loud that Emily was gone had left me feeling shaken. I came up with it on the spot after seeing that papercraft charm. It really felt like it helped me out, you know. She pulled the charm from her pocket and gazed at it with a wistful smile. I think I told you before about someone who once told me it's a waste to judge someone based on just one side of who they are. The person who made this charm for me was the one who said that. Mary told me that she had suffered from a serious illness and had spent a lot of time in the hospital as a child. After numerous surgeries and a long stay, she was now able to live a relatively normal life with regular checkups. During her time in the hospital, she became friends with the girl who had given her the papercraft charm. While Mary eventually recovered, the girl's condition was something that no medicine could fully cure. Even after Mary was discharged and started attending middle school, she continued visiting the hospital to see her friend. She had lost her parents in an accident and lived separately from her brother. She always seemed a little lonely, but whenever I visited, she'd brighten up and talk to me excitedly. She was so kind and got along with everyone in the hospital. They told her it might be difficult for her to live past 20, but she fought hard and reached 20. She was so close to finally living with her brother, who was overseas, but then. Mary's voice trembled and her eyes glistened faintly with tears. It was my Emily. At the sound of her name, my eyes widened in shock. Emily? She was my one and only sister. No way. You're Emily's brother. We both fell into stunned silence. Could this really be happening? Was it even possible that Mary was Emily's friend? The coincidence seemed unreal. I had no idea you were her brother. I said such horrible things when we first met, and I never even thanked you properly for saving me that night. Thank you. She lowered her head suddenly, and I panicked, telling her to lift her head. I remembered how Emily, who couldn't go out freely due to her long hospital stays, was really good at making paper crafts. Mary, by any chance, did you visit the hospital that day? Oh yes. I had a routine checkup, so I went to the hospital and was on my way home. The distinctive scent of alcohol I noticed when we first met. It wasn't just my imagination after all. I can't remember Emily's voice anymore. Without looking at a photo, I felt like I might forget Emily's face, but that scene stayed vividly in my mind. It became the memory that anchored me. As I lowered my head and murmured, "I see," Mary gently spoke to me. Emily always said she was so proud of you, Lucas. She said you'd come back from overseas every year, bringing her souvenirs and stories from your travels. She'd get so excited and determined to recover enough for temporary discharge whenever you were coming back. I wasn't the kind of brother she could be proud of. After we lost our parents, I barely spent any time with her. Her words made me painfully aware of how powerless I had been as her brother. That's not true. Emily said Lucas was amazing. No matter how you see yourself, in her eyes, you were the coolest, most beloved brother. Honestly, she talked about you so much that I started wondering just how awesome her brother really was. Surprised by her rapid words, I looked at her face. Our eyes met, and she was smiling with a tearful expression and softly murmured, "Yeah, it's true. Just like Emily said, Lucas, You really are a wonderful person." I wondered what kind of expression I had at that moment. Unlike her tearful eyes, mine felt completely dry. The following week, everything returned to normal at work. With the seminar event wrapped up, my paired assignments with Mary had come to an end, and we no longer crossed paths at work. One Friday night, I received a message from Mary, even though we hadn't really spoken much all week. "Would you like to visit Emily's grave with me this weekend?" I had been thinking about it all week. I hadn't been able to properly say goodbye to Emily. Maybe it was time to find closure. I accepted her invitation and left home Saturday morning. It was about an hour-and-a-half train ride from the city, somewhere not quite urban, but not too rural either. It had been a long time since I'd returned to my hometown. Emily now rested in the same place as my parents. The cemetery was about a 30-minute taxi ride from the station, a vast, well-maintained green space. Every time I returned to the U.S., I made sure to visit my parents' grave, but this was the first time in 7 years. I couldn't help but feel like an ungrateful son. We arrived at the gravesite. For some reason, I couldn't take a single step forward. Emily is here. Just the thought of it made my vision blur. Then I felt a soft hand on my back, gently soothing me. It was Mary, who had come with me. Despite barely having spoken during the trip, I was grateful for the silence between us. Taking a deep breath, I finally stepped up to the grave. I placed the flowers I'd brought, lit the candle, and pressed my hands together in prayer. "Dad and Mom, I'm home." I greeted my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to speak to Emily, the gravestone now bearing more than just my parents' names. The reality that Emily was truly here hit me hard. "Lucas, I received this as a keepsake from your grandmother, but I think you should have it." Mary handed me an old smartphone. It was an outdated model that Emily had used for years. It was still charged and could be powered on. Inside were photos that Emily had taken. There were photos of her with Mary, smiling happily alongside her friends, her age friends I'd never seen before, and the sight made me smile. It hit me then. I had never taken a photo with Emily. I'd always avoided the camera, saying I didn't like photos. I regretted it now. In the folder titled Big Brother, there were childhood photos of Emily and me, likely taken from our family albums, and scenic pictures I had taken abroad and sent to her. Well, I wasn't sure if I should show you, but check the drafts folder. When I opened the email inbox as she suggested, there was indeed a single unsent message in the drafts folder. I opened the folder and read through it for a while, but I was left speechless. "Big Brother, I was so happy when you told me over the phone that you were coming back to the U.S. and that we could live together. I said I was excited, but the truth is, we can't live together after all. Because you'd push yourself too hard for me, wouldn't you? Lucas, I probably don't have much time left. I don't want to see you sad because of me. I want you to live your own life freely. It might sound a bit dramatic, but this is my wish. If I'm allowed one last selfish request, please cry a lot when I'm gone. Cry, and don't forget me. But after you've cried, live happily and laugh again. Live your life. I love you, my big brother." I scrolled down and saw one more line of text. "Lucas, I miss you." Tears streamed down my face as I read the message. The message had been written just a week before Emily passed away. What was Emily feeling as she typed it? What was going through her mind? What expression did she wear? How many times had she rewritten it? Was she crying? Smiling? In pain? Scared? Sniff. A strangled sob escaped my lips. A grown man kneeling at a grave, crying his heart out. It must have looked ridiculous. But I didn't care about that. Emily was gone. For the first time, I fully accepted that reality. Mary knelt beside me, not caring that the ground stained her clothes, and gently wrapped her arms around my shoulder as I sobbed. "You finally cried. holding back tears when you want to cry. It's so painful, isn't it? Mary's soft voice and the steady beat of her heart reached my ears. Yeah, you're alive. That sound reminded me of life itself. And gradually, my tears began to subside. Emily used to say, if Lucas and Mary got married, we could stay together as a family forever. It was like a little kid's fairy tale. But sometimes, I feel like Emily brought us together. After you've cried and cried, once you've cried it all out, why don't you try living and laughing with me? In response to her gentle, whispered words, I softly placed my hand over hers on my shoulder. Emily, I'm home. A gentle breeze swept over us, brushing against our heads as if in a tender embrace. The sadness of losing someone never truly goes away. But when you face that sadness head-on, you can find something precious in its place. My name is David Kwan, and 5 months ago, I was a senior operations executive at one of the fastest-growing logistics firms in the Midwest, Novacor Freight. I wasn't just a cog in the machine. I built half the machine. I'd spent 7 years with the company, starting as a data analyst fresh out of grad school. I climbed the ranks through hard work, sleepless nights, and relentless attention to detail. I knew the warehouse systems like the back of my hand, had personal relationships with nearly every regional manager, and most importantly, I cared. Maybe that's what got me into trouble. I cared too much. Novacor prided itself on efficiency, but in recent months, that efficiency had come at a cost. Cut hours, overworked drivers, and shipping delays we were trained to cover up with slick language in customer reports. It started small. A skipped maintenance check here, a rescheduled delivery there. But then came the accident. One of our trucks, driven by a man who had worked a double shift, flipped on an icy freeway ramp. He survived, barely. The shipment was destroyed, and the driver ended up in the hospital for 6 weeks with spinal injuries. When I raised concerns about driver safety at the quarterly leadership review, I didn't sugarcoat anything. I laid out facts, statistics, and internal emails showing we had pushed too hard, ignored too many warning signs. I even proposed a modest budget adjustment that could cover improved scheduling and vehicle maintenance without affecting profits significantly. My colleagues looked uncomfortable. My boss, COO Marcus Levin, tightened his jaw. But the CEO, Charles Grenton, he gave me a long, unreadable look. The next day, I was called into HR. They said it was a strategic restructuring. I was being let go, with a severance package and a script to follow if asked by the press. I stared at the HR rep as she explained it all like she was reading off a shopping list. I asked if this had anything to do with what I brought up in the meeting. She gave a faint smile and said, "We're not at liberty to discuss that, Mr. Kwan." That night, I went home and sat in the dark for hours. My wife, Laura, sat beside me on the couch, silent, her hand on mine. I felt angry, humiliated, but more than that, I felt betrayed. Not just by a company I had served faithfully, but by an industry that punished you for doing the right thing. I could have taken the payout and walked away quietly, but something in me snapped. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of starting over. I was furious enough to do it, and that's when the idea hit me. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a storm of rage, humiliation, and a desperate need to prove that I wasn't finished. Laura brought me coffee at 5 a.m. as I stared at my laptop, a blank spreadsheet open in front of me. "You okay?" she asked gently. "No," I replied, "but I have an idea." The idea had been brewing even before I got fired. I knew the logistics industry better than most, its flaws, its inefficiencies, the cracks they were papering over with cost-cutting and numbers games. I knew the drivers were exhausted. I knew smaller companies were being bullied into silence. And I knew one thing for certain. The system was broken. The problem was, Nobody wanted to fix it. Not if it meant sacrificing profits. But what if someone did fix it? I started jotting down everything. Ideas for a leaner, driver-first logistics company. One that didn't just chase revenue, but invested in people. Real-time tracking powered by AI. Fair, rotating schedules for drivers. Warehouses staffed with the right number of people instead of skeleton crews. I didn't want to build a company that played the same game. I wanted to rewrite the rules. But I had nothing. No office. No employees. No capital. Just fire in my chest and 7 years of experience. I called 2 people that morning, Tom Reyes, a warehouse manager I'd worked with for years, and Kayla Benton, a brilliant software engineer who'd left Novacor last year after being passed over for promotion 3 times. They both picked up on the first ring. "You serious?" Tom asked, half excited, half doubtful. "You're actually gonna start your own company?" "Dead serious," I said. "But I need your help." Kayla was more cautious. "You have funding." "No," I admitted. "Not yet." "Then you need a pitch deck, a business model, and a miracle." I smiled. "I'm working on all 3. The real challenge wasn't the dream. It was bringing it to life while my reputation had been quietly tarnished behind the scenes. Charles and his PR team at Novacor had already started spreading their version of the truth, that I'd become increasingly erratic, resistant to new directives, and was no longer aligned with the company's long-term vision. Translation. I spoke up and embarrassed the leadership team in front of stakeholders. Calls to former colleagues suddenly went unanswered. One even texted me, "You know I support you, but I can't risk getting involved right now." Novacor had made sure my name was radioactive. I spent the next 3 weeks holed up in our tiny guest room, surviving off black coffee and takeout noodles, building the foundation for what I called True Path Logistics. Kayla helped me shape the software side, smart routing, real-time delivery adjustments, predictive scheduling based on weather and traffic data. Tom reached out to his network of drivers, and slowly, names started to come in. Not a lot, but enough to start. The hardest part was money. Laura and I liquidated our savings, including the small college fund we've been building for our daughter. It was terrifying, but Laura never once questioned me. She just said, "I trust you. Go build something that matters." With enough to cover a few months of basic operations, I incorporated TruePath and leased a tiny warehouse outside of Des Moines. Hardly glamorous, but strategically placed. It was a risk, especially since Novacor dominated the region. Then came the call I wasn't expecting. "David, this is Sheila Tang. I run Green Drop Organics." Green Drop was a growing produce distributor trying to expand into same-day delivery for local grocers. Novacor had botched 2 deliveries for them in 1 week. Sheila had heard, through Kayla, I later learned, that I was starting something new. "You got trucks?" she asked. 2, I said. "And drivers. Can you guarantee early morning drop-offs and reliable cold chain maintenance? If I say yes, I'll make it happen." She paused. "I'll send a contract by EOD. Trial run. Don't screw it up." I hung up the phone and laughed. Not from joy, from sheer disbelief. I was in. But this was just the beginning of a much bigger war. The Green Drop contract changed everything. Our first delivery was a simple one. 15 crates of organic kale, spinach, and cucumbers to be dropped at 3 specialty grocers in the Des Moines metro area before 6:00 a.m., the kind of order Novacor used to treat as low priority. Tom personally drove the truck. I stayed up all night watching our new dashboard, developed in record time by Kayla and her freelance coder friend, Malik, as it tracked the refrigerated vehicle in real time. At 5:42 a.m., the delivery was complete. No delays, no damaged goods, and when I called Sheila at 6:15 to check in, her only response was, You're hired. 2 days later, she referred us to a farm-to-table meal kit startup that had been struggling with unreliable shipments from their previous provider. Then another call came in, and another. We weren't scaling yet, but the momentum was real. By the end of our second month, we had 5 trucks, 10 part-time drivers, and a network of 6 small to mid-sized businesses relying on TruePath. But success wasn't the only thing growing. So was Novacore's interest in crushing us. It started subtly. A former warehouse supervisor I had spoken with for advice told me he'd been pulled into an internal audit after texting me. Then 2 of my early driver recruits received calls from their old Novacore managers warning them that I was under investigation for misuse of proprietary data. Total fabrication, but effective. Fear spread faster than my software could load a new route. Then came the email. It was from Charles Grenton himself. Short, blunt, and laced with the kind of smug confidence only men like him had earned in their glass towers. David, I understand you've been making moves. I would advise you to tread carefully. Some of the systems you're using sound eerily similar to Novacore IP. We'd hate for legal trouble to ruin your fresh start. Charles G. I read it twice, then showed it to Kayla and Tom in our makeshift office. Still just a corner of the warehouse with 2 folding tables and a coffee machine that coughed more than it brewed. They're scared, Kayla said. No, Tom muttered. They're just getting started. I was furious, not just at the pettiness of it, but the arrogance. Charles wasn't content with letting me go. He needed to destroy me to prove he was still in control. So I did something risky. I posted the email, redacted but unmistakably real, on LinkedIn. Alongside it, I wrote, I was fired from Novacore for pointing out unsafe labor practices and suggesting driver protections. Now that I've started a company committed to those values, I'm being threatened again. This industry needs to change. I'm not backing down. The post went viral within 2 days. Hundreds of comments flooded in. Truckers, warehouse workers, mid-level managers from logistics firms I'd never even heard of. Many of them said the same thing. We've seen this too. Keep going. I was invited onto a small logistics industry podcast, then a medium-sized one, then a national one. By month 4, we had tripled our client base. But the bigger we got, the harder Charles hit back. Novacore slashed their rates aggressively in areas where we operated, offering too good to be true deals to our clients. One small grocer backed out of a contract they had just signed with us. Another client received an anonymous tip about our trucks lacking proper refrigeration logs. We had to send inspectors to verify everything was compliant. Then one morning, Tom walked into the warehouse with a grim expression. We got a leak, he said. He dropped a folder onto my desk. It contained screenshots, internal messages from one of our junior logistics planners, Emma. She had been forwarding our delivery schedules to someone with the Novacore email address. I trusted her, Tom whispered. We confronted her that day. She admitted everything. Charles's team had offered her a job and a 5-figure bonus to feed them details on our routes and clients. It hurt. She'd been with us from week 2. I didn't scream. I just nodded and told her to leave. After she walked out, I turned to Tom. We're not bleeding. They are. That's why they're so desperate. But I was tired. Every win came with a counterattack. Every step forward was through mud and resistance. That night, Lara found me sitting on the porch, staring out at nothing. I'm proud of you, she said softly. I'm exhausted, I admitted. You should be. You're fighting giants with a slingshot. I smiled. Yeah, but I'm starting to think I've got better aim. The next morning, we closed a deal with a regional supermarket chain. It wasn't massive, but it was stable income and enough scale to finally justify hiring full-time dispatchers and a compliance officer. We bought our 8th truck the following week. And then came the email that changed everything. It wasn't from a grocer, a supplier, or a journalist. It was from Marcus Levin, Novacore's chief operating officer. The same man who sat silently in that boardroom when I stood up for driver safety. The same man who never looked me in the eye when I was terminated. Now he was reaching out to me. David, can we talk privately? I'm considering a career move and would like your perspective on TruePath. You're doing something important. I think I want to be a part of it. Marcus. I stared at the screen. Was it genuine? Or another trap? I didn't respond to Marcus right away. I stared at his email for nearly an hour, reading it over and over. This was the same man who watched me get fired without blinking. Who let me hang in that boardroom, who didn't raise a hand or a word when I presented cold, hard facts about our crumbling operations. And now he wanted to talk. I forwarded the email to Kayla and Town. Their reactions were instant and polar opposite. Absolutely not, Kayla replied. It's bait. You bring him in, and we're dead. He's a Novacore insider. He'll gut us from the inside. Tom, on the other hand, leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful look. What if he's legit? What if he's jumping ship? You know how Charles operates. Marcus probably doesn't want to go down with him. Kayla rolled her eyes. And what if this is Charles's latest move? What if Marcus is the Trojan horse? They were both right. I needed to be careful. So I decided to test him. I wrote back the next day. Marcus, I'm open to a conversation. In person only. No calls, no Zoom. 1 hour. Neutral location. David. He agreed immediately. We met at a small cafe in a suburb west of the city. I got there early, sat at a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. When Marcus walked in, he looked thinner than I remembered, more tired. His suit still cost more than most people's monthly rent, but he didn't wear it with the same authority. He sat down across from me and didn't speak for a few seconds. Finally, he said, "You were right. Back in that boardroom. You were the only one willing to say what needed to be said." I stayed silent. Let him talk. "After your exit, things got worse," he continued. "More corners cut. More accidents. 2 drivers filed legal claims. One of our warehouse staff was hospitalized after a pallet rack collapse. Charles just kept pushing. Faster, cheaper, meaner. I tried to slow it down internally. But he shook his head. You know how that goes." "I do," I said. My voice was flat, unreadable. "I've been with Novacore 12 years," he said. "But I can't keep selling my soul. I want out." I leaned forward. "Why come to me?" "Because you're building something that matters," he said, locking eyes with me. "And you're winning. Quietly, steadily. You have a vision that this industry desperately needs. I want to be a part of that. I'm not asking for a title. I'm asking for a second chance." It was an emotional pitch, maybe even a sincere one. But my guard was still up. "If I even consider bringing you in," I said, "I need leverage. Something that proves you're not just here to spy and report back." He nodded slowly, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "This has internal documentation, safety violations, falsified logs, driver complaints that were buried. Some of it links directly to Charles. It's all yours. Do what you want with it." I didn't touch it. Not yet. Back at the warehouse, Kayla exploded when I told her, "You're out of your mind. He could be setting you up. Or he could be handing us the sword we need to finally take Novacore down." I took the flash drive to an old friend from grad school, Danielle Tran, now a lawyer with a reputation for investigative firepower. She scanned through the files and her eyes widened. "This is bad," she said. "For them. Really bad." She found incident reports that had never been disclosed to insurance or legal teams. emails from Charles authorizing unpaid overtime, and worst of all, documentation of manipulated GPS logs to hide driver fatigue. The kind of thing that, if exposed, could lead to federal penalties and public scandal. I had two options. Take the information public. Use it strategically. Option 1 would scorch the earth. Charles and Novacor would go down in flames, but we might get dragged into the inferno by proximity. Option 2 could change everything. I chose the second. We quietly sent copies of the most damning files, anonymously, to 3 key Novacor clients. Then waited. The fallout was immediate. Within a week, Novacor lost 2 national accounts. One major client issued a statement about compliance inconsistencies and announced they were seeking alternative logistics partnerships. Charles was blindsided. I didn't stop there. Using Marcus's knowledge of Novacor's pricing structures and internal inefficiencies, we refined our pitch and pricing. We began targeting medium-sized clients who had long felt overlooked by Novacor's volume-obsessed model. Our onboarding process became smoother, more automated. Kayla's routing system cut our delivery delays by 40%. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. And then, it happened. Charles went on the offensive, in public. He gave an interview to Logistics Today, accusing former disgruntled employees of spreading lies and orchestrating a smear campaign. He called me out by name, claiming I'd stolen proprietary technology and was sabotaging the industry. I responded with calm, controlled, professional. I wrote a piece in Medium titled, "When Speaking Up Gets You Fired, and Why I'd Do It Again." In it, I detailed the truth behind my termination, the vision behind TruePath, and our commitment to ethical logistics. I didn't stoop to personal attacks. I didn't name names. I let our results speak louder than revenge. It worked. Clients flooded in. Drivers applied by the dozens. Media outlets picked up the story. Investors reached out. One morning, Kayla came into the office holding her phone. "We just got a request for a partnership proposal," she said. "From who?" She smiled. "One of Novacor's largest national clients." I looked down at a flash drive, still sitting in my drawer, and let out a slow breath. We had turned the tide. I never imagined the moment I'd be asked to submit a partnership proposal to a client that once exclusively worked with Novacor. The same client who, just a year ago, wouldn't even return my emails. Now, they were offering us a chance to handle their Midwest operations. A contract worth over $3.2 million annually. I closed the office door behind me and sat in silence for a long moment. Not out of disbelief, but out of something deeper. Gratitude. Vindication. A touch of sadness, too, for all the time I'd spent trying to be loyal to a company that had never been loyal to its people. When I walked out to the main floor, Kayla was giving our new junior coders a run-through of the tracking system. Tom was leading a safety briefing with a team of recently onboarded drivers. The warehouse hummed with controlled energy. No chaos, just purpose. This was the empire we'd built from the ashes. But empires aren't just made of trucks and data. They're made of people. And it was time I acknowledged that publicly. So, one crisp Friday morning, I called a staff meeting. Everyone, from dispatch to drivers, from coders to janitors, stood in the middle of the warehouse as I climbed onto a makeshift platform made from a crate. "I want to say something I should have said sooner," I began. "Every single person here is part of something bigger than just deliveries. We're not just another logistics company. We're a statement. A promise that integrity still has a place in business. That speaking up doesn't mean getting shut down. That people matter." There was quiet for a moment. Then the clapping started. Then cheers. That afternoon, I got a message on LinkedIn from a name I hadn't seen in months. Charles Grenton. "David, congratulations on your recent wins. I trust you understand now how difficult leadership can be. I have no interest in continuing this conflict. Perhaps we can talk. Charles. I stared at it, then turned the screen toward Kayla. Block him, she said without missing a beat. No response is the response. I agreed. Charles was no longer my problem. A month later, Novacor quietly announced that Charles would be stepping down as CEO to pursue personal projects. The press release was filled with empty phrases, but behind closed doors, we knew what had happened. The board had finally had enough. Public backlash. Client loss. Lawsuits beginning to stack up. The company was in decline. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Because while they were bleeding out trying to save their reputation, we were opening our second warehouse. TruePath had grown to 42 employees. Our fleet now ran across 4 states. We signed contracts with 2 major grocery chains and a medical supply distributor. And we did it without sacrificing our values. One day, while visiting our Iowa City branch, a young driver named Raman pulled me aside. Hey, Mr. Kwan. I just wanted to say, this is the first company I've worked for where I don't feel like I'm disposable. I told my mom about it. She cried. That moment stayed with me more than any deal, any milestone. Because that was the point all along. Not just building something bigger, but building something better. We implemented wellness days for our drivers, rolled out quarterly safety bonuses. Kayla and her team created a driver support app that connected workers to mental health resources and HR channels directly. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. And people noticed. 1 year after I was fired, Forbes ran a story on us. TruePath Logistics. Disruption with a conscience. The reporter asked me, "What's the secret to your success?" I told her the truth. I stopped chasing someone else's definition of success. I stopped being afraid to speak up. And I stopped believing loyalty to a broken system was a virtue. She asked if I had any regrets. I paused. Only one, I said. That I didn't do it sooner. Now, every time I walk through our facility, I see more than pallets and forklifts. I see people who believed when it was just an idea. I see Kayla, who risked her career to stand with me. Tom, who refused to sit on the sidelines. Marcus, who eventually left Novacor and joined us full-time, not for a second chance, but because he wanted to finally do right. And I see Lara. Always waiting up when I come home late. Always asking how the team is doing. Always reminding me that integrity isn't just a business model. It's the legacy I'll leave behind. This isn't just my empire. It's ours.